and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am very happy, as always, to be with you, to bring you another author interview. Still catching up and making progress, so thank you for hanging in there with me as we've been catching up. I do want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. It really does help get the podcast out to more listeners, to more readers. If you want to help the podcast and the network as a whole in another way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net and there leave a donation of your choosing. As I said, this helps the podcast. It helps the network as a whole. It is really, really helpful, as all of your support is. This podcast does not work without your support, so whether you're new or you've been here for a very long time, that support is greatly appreciated, whatever form that support has taken during your course of time being a part of the podcast. So thank you so much. How has your week been? It's been a normal week for me. It's summer holiday for a lot of my students, so that sometimes makes my schedule a little strange with a lot of reschedules or cancellations or this or that. It's summer holiday, so students are still taking classes, but they're also doing other things. I have a lot of students who are children, so their schedule is sometimes in flux as they do whatever it is that they are doing on this particular summer holiday, and then I get to hear about it later. I had a student yesterday tell me about his trip to Japan. It's so fun to just have students from lots of different places in the world, and they tell me where they live, and then they tell me where they visit, and I get to hear their perspectives, and I think it's a lot of fun. But that's what I mean. I like the teaching, of course, but the connections that I make with my students are really my favorite part. And you may recall the episode we had a while back talking about storytelling. Actually, we had a couple episodes in a row talking about storytelling, but the stories that my students share with me are incredibly touching to me and important to me, and I really, really love that part of my teaching job. So it's been a good week in terms of listening to my students talk about what they're doing on their summer holidays, and the way their schedules are a little bit different than they normally are. At any rate, we are, of course, here to talk about a book. We are here to talk with an author about her book. In this case, we are talking to Christina Kovac about her book, Watch Us Fall. Let me give you the description of this book. By the author of The Cutaway, a work of psychological suspense set in the days leading up to and following the mysterious death of one of Washington, D.C.'s hottest investigative reporters. Lucy and her three best friends share a glamorous but decaying house in the heart of Georgetown. They call themselves the Sweeties and live an idyllic post-grad lifestyle, complete with exciting jobs, dramatic love lives, and most importantly, each other. But when Addie, the group's queen bee, discovers that her ex-boyfriend Josh has gone missing, the Sweeties' worlds are turned upside down. In the days leading up to his disappearance, Josh, a star investigative journalist from a prominent political family, was behaving erratically, and Lucy is determined to find out why. All four friends upend their lives to search for him, but detectives begin to suspect that the Sweeties might know more than they're letting on. As the investigation unfolds, Lucy's obsession with the case reaches a boiling point, and with it her own troubling secrets begin bubbling to the surface of her carefully curated life. A thrilling account of the lies and delusions that lurk beneath cloistered groups of female friends and the sinister realities of celebrity. Watch Us Fall is a gripping mystery and an examination of the things we tell ourselves when we can't face the truth. And so, of course, that is the description of Watch Us Fall. You get a good idea of the psychological and the suspense aspect with Addie's boyfriend Josh going missing. That is the mystery. There is the police, of course, are trying to solve the mystery. Lucy herself becomes obsessed with trying to figure out what happened and what is going on. Addie is her best friend. All four of the girls are very, very close friends, but Addie and Lucy especially are close. And Lucy really, really starts to focus on this case and what happened and how to solve it. She dives in headfirst, but she's got secrets of her own. And so this is a story, there is a mystery, but this is a story of secrets. This is a story of female friendships and the layers of those friendships and how those friendships can how the dynamics of those friendships can shift and change as life happens and experiences change. What do those friendships look like as we move through life, as new people come into the group, as Josh came into the group when Addie started dating him. At first, she didn't even tell the friends that she was dating him, but then when she did and they met him, of course, the dynamics of their group shifted. So, how does that all connect? Does it connect? Lucy is determined to figure this out. We get not only Lucy's perspective, for most of the book, we get Lucy's perspective, but there are also chapters from Josh's perspective before he went missing. So, we're getting a different perspective of events, of the group, of the dynamics, of Josh's feelings and actions, etc. So there's a lot of different layers to this story. But of course, Christina can tell you much more about it, about the writing of it, about some of her inspiration behind those layers. So let's go ahead and turn to the conversation with Christina. Again, she is Christina Kovac, and the book is Watch Us Fall. Hi, Christina. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I am excited to talk to you about Watch Us Fall, which we can see behind you. That's great. Before we get to the book, though, if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Okay, I'm Christina Kovac. I'm a novelist who lives outside of Washington, D.C. I've lived here almost my whole life. Um, I graduated from University of Maryland with an English journalism degree, and I went on to do broadcast journalism from a very young age. I worked in TV for 17 years, all of it in Washington, D.C. I started off in local news covering crime, which was really eye-opening for a kid like
Mm-hmm.
me from the suburbs. I lived on the Hill. I lived and worked, and it was all just very exciting to me. Those were really sort of the best years of my life. Um, Around 9/11, or just before 9/11, I went to work at the Washington Bureau of NBC News under Tim Russert, who, to me was like sort of my idol. And there I did network news. Covered some politics, which I didn't like very much. I just found crime to be a lot more honest. So
Mm.
I liked to be on all the crime
That's
stories. Uh, I I stayed for quite a while until it became difficult to kind of manage my work and raising kids. And I thought, oh, I just love books. I just love reading books. Let me just try writing a book. How hard can it be? Oh my gosh. So I did. I wrote my first book and it came out in 2017 with Simon and Schuster, and that was called The Cutaway. And then my second book, Watch Us Fall, just came out. They are psychological thrillers. I love thrillers and crime novels. I love the gritty sort of thing. And they all take place in DC, which is a city that I just love so much. And I'm currently working on book three.
okay. Yes, as I hear you talk, I can see so much of your experience that feeds into this current book. So, can you give an overview of the story in Watch Us Fall?
So, Watch Us Fall is a psychological thriller, which is different than my first book. My first book was really a crime thriller. I was really interested in writing a psychological thriller because so much of it takes place in the head.
Mhm.
It's about what's true and what's not true. It's about what we can see and what we can't see. And it very much focuses on the two main characters' flaws in reasoning. Um, it's about four girls who they're best friends from college. They're quite young. They just graduated from college in Georgetown. And they loved their life and they love their life together so much that they just really don't get very far from campus. They live in this really cool old house on O Street, which is like this famous street in Georgetown. It's beautiful. It has like cobblestone streets and really old, cool houses. And it's,
Mm.
right around the corner from bars. Anyway, so they're living their best lives. They're happy. It's brunches and parties and boyfriends. And then the best friend of the narrator, Lucy. So Lucy is the narrator telling the story. Her best friend, Addie, falls in love with this celebrity journalist. And he kind of just bursts into their lives. Addie's in love. Josh is a very mysterious person to them. He is a 30-year-old son of a famous senator who died when he ran for president. He has many secrets. Addie seems very happy, but she doesn't talk much about the relationship. And then a storm is kind of bearing down on Washington, D.C., a snowstorm, which, if you know Washington, like 6 inches of snow is like a horrific thing. But this is like feet of snow
Yeah.
is bearing down on them. Addie goes out for a jog. She's a runner right before the snow comes, just so she can get a run in before she's cooped up forever. And she's attacked on the C&O Canal. And she comes home and she tells her best friend Lucy, who is right away into, oh my God, what are we going to do mode? Later that night, Josh disappears.
Yes. There's a lot of layers as you're reading and things start building up. So what was your initial inspiration for the story?
I started writing it during COVID when we were all locked up, not locked up, in.
Felt like it sometimes.
And we couldn't be with our friends. And I miss my friends so much.
Hmm.
I'm very social. I have a core group of writer friends, a core group of like old journalist friends and neighbor. And I just sort of love the tactile feel of female friendship. I miss just hanging out and drinking and talking about books and just being goofy. So I think it was kind of out of that loneliness. And at the height of it, when we weren't even supposed to, I guess, be outside, it was just a really weird time. I went to this place called Assateague, which is a kind of a barrier island off the coast of Maryland. And I just was hiking in the back bay area, and I saw this beautiful old tree. And there were these four girls up in a tree. They were quite young, I think probably teenagers. And they were just sort of being goofy and just
Mm.
banging up against each other and laughing. And just, I thought, you're going to fall out of that tree.
Yeah.
It was I just thought, I missed my friends. And I walked
Mhm.
away from that hike and I just kept thinking about those girls. And I kept thinking about the tree. And the tree it was just this really beautiful, enormous tree. And they're hanging out on these limbs. I just kept thinking about it. So I moved the tree to the banks of the Potomac. And those four girls, I just sort of aged up, to college and after college. And I just imagined what it would be like to be them.
Yeah. I love the story that Christina tells about being out walking and seeing those young girls in the tree, just enjoying nature, enjoying each other, laughing. Just it sounds like they were having a really wonderful afternoon. And you see things like that, and sometimes they make a deep impact, and you look and think, oh, that is such a lovely moment. And in this case, it inspired a book. And those girls may never know that their afternoon, which may or may not have seemed at all special to them, inspired the Sweeties, inspired, in fact, an entire book, which I think is just amazing. I love that. We're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, that was the inspiration for the initial inspiration for the book. What about the inspiration for the mystery? You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute. I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning. Oh, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Christina Kovac. As we get into this second segment, I do want to give you your second and final reminder that you can help the podcast in a monetary fashion by going to gsmcpodcast.net, leaving a donation that again helps not only the podcast but the network as a whole. And again, your support, whatever form of support you give and have given and will maybe give in the future, is always and will continue to be greatly appreciated. Before the break, Christina was talking about the seeing a group of girls in a tree just while she was out for a hike, and how that served as the basis for the Sweeties and the inspiration for their relationship and that part of the story. But what about the mystery? Let's return to the conversation to find out more. So they call themselves the Sweeties, and the Sweeties came first then, and then the mystery element came second. Was there any inspiration for that, or just kind of figuring out what the mystery part would be?
Well, I sort of thought, at the time, I don't know, it's hard to remember what was going on exactly at that time, except for I knew that there was a lot of misinformation starting. It really kind of geared up during COVID. There's so much misinformation on the internet and in social media about like what to do, how to stay healthy. And I'm like, people are just talking. They're just not
Hmm.
even telling that. I mean, it's based on nothing.
Yeah.
And there was so much kind of lying going on and weird stuff. And so I thought it'd be really interesting to post a person who is obsessed with the truth. And that would be, I guess, a journalist. He's just sort of obsessed with the truth, and he cannot accept a lie for very deep psychological reasons. His father was just a liar, and his father, who was a famous senator, was a liar, and it really caused so much conflict in his life. Psychologically, it was very damaging to him. And so when he meets this group of four women who sort of hold on to these stories about each other, they're not even really lies so
Hmm.
much, though some of them are. Um, he just really doesn't like that. And so he kind
Yeah.
of pushes against that. And I thought that was interesting. The other thing about Josh that I wanted to lay down a marker about what I thought was best in journalism, because that also felt like that was changing. I imagine Josh to be this sort of Tim Russert, tell the truth, let's go to the videotape, catch people in their lies, do not allow
Hmm.
people to lie to you, with the kind of Ronan Farrow determination, that kind of a journalist. Um, and then I was also sort of thinking like JFK Jr. mystique, I mean, why not? It's my book.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that was sort of the marker, like, this is how it should be done. But there's also negatives to that. There are also
Hmm.
dangers to that, because something might be factually true, but emotionally untrue. And I was really sort of interested in that playground of, delusion, mental illness, um, the need for truth,
Right.
how dangerous it is not to accept the truth, that sort of area.
Yeah. Josh can be very black or white, truth or lie, as opposed to is it a lie, or are there reasons that people, like, there's lies, and then there's lies of omission, and then there's things that we don't say because for whatever reason. So there's a lot of gray area in there that we see with Lucy, but with all of the Sweeties in some capacity.
Right. Right. I think the lies that we tell ourselves, are the most fascinating to me, because they're very dangerous, or they can be very dangerous. Um, but they're also so human. I mean, we do it all the time. We want to believe certain things. We want, in order to um, stay together as a community, sometimes we have to believe good things about each other. And that was another interesting dynamic about the four best friends. I thought, there's some things that they're saying to each other that are obvious lies, or obviously a stretch, let's say. And why do we allow people to lie to us? That was, I think, really a big motivator for me in writing the story and, getting into that whole psychology, because it's a frailty, not telling the truth. It's a weakness. And when you love somebody, you just don't want to poke in their wound. You just don't.
Lucy does not always feel like a reliable narrator, so we have some unreliable narrator issues. But what about her? We get most of the book from her point of view. There are some chapters from Josh's point of view. But what about Lucy, do you think will resonate with readers?
I think she is, I think she's really human. I think she's sort of a poster child for what not to do. What's really interesting about Lucy is that the narrative rises and falls based on her weaknesses and strengths, her cognitive weaknesses and strengths. We don't realize how much impact we have on other people's lives by holding on to delusions about ourselves. We don't realize how much impact. And so, here are these two people, Addie, who is this really interesting character. She's sort of a leader. She's very strong in a lot of ways. She cares about her friends deeply. And here's this other guy, Josh, who is, by all accounts, just a powerful guy. And they're deeply impacted by her unwillingness or inability really to see what her to see her truths about her life. And I think that's we're impacted by our community so much, and so I really sort of wanted to play with that. Our friends matter, and they impact us in ways that we don't always comprehend right away.
Yeah. Christina said, our friends matter, and they impact our community. Very true. Sometimes our friends are the really close friend group we have, like the Sweeties, but then there's the wider friend groups, right? There's our bigger communities. We all have communities within communities, and sometimes they're a Venn diagram and they intersect, and sometimes they don't, but every relationship can affect that community. And that is the case with Josh when he and Addie started dating and Addie introduced them to the group. How did that then change the dynamics of this very close-knit group? What did that do to Addie and Lucy's relationship? How did Lucy feel about her very best friend and this man that there's some issues with trust between both Lucy and Josh. They don't click. So Addie and Lucy are best friends. Josh and Addie are dating. How does that affect the dynamic? But we're going to go ahead and take our next break of this episode. When we come back, the age of the friends. We are continuing this conversation a little bit, but there's a segue. So Christina will be picking up talking about the age of the Sweeties. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Christina Kovac. Before the break, we were talking about communities and friend groups and how different relationships can affect those communities and those friend groups. And there is not a question from me in the... We're picking up that conversation, but there was a transition as Christina pivoted a little bit. So we're picking up with that pivot. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Christina. They're also young. I mean, they've known each other through college. So they met at 18. They're now 22, 23-ish. They're still developing cognitively in some ways. So trying to navigate the situations and the circumstances that they're navigating is not easy for even old people who have more experience.
Yeah. And I think, and that was actually key now that I think, it's been a while since I've written it, but that was really such a key part of it that, ultimately these women, they're women now, I mean, just barely, but, ultimately these four women are just trying to stay together. They're just trying to hold on to what they had. That was really quite beautiful. And it's a very strange part of a woman's life because, you leave the cloistered community of college, where everything is just sort of, you eat in the dining halls or with your friends,
Yeah.
Everything is sort of right there. And they were so happy with each other and so kind of in love with each other that they tried to hold on to that. But they're going into a world that just doesn't really make room for that.
Yeah.
They're supposed to look for jobs now. People are starting to pair up. Some of their friends are already having families,
Yeah.
and so, they can feel that kind of pushing at them. And all of it is within this really old, cool house that Lucy just thinks is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
Um, and Josh walks into the house and he's like, oh my God, this place is a dump.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting to see what is heaven for some people, and
Mhm.
how hard they try to hold on to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think about my best friend in college and just the simple thing of picking up the phone and being like, "Hey, I'm going grocery shopping. Do you want to go with me?" Like, you become an adult, you don't really have those friends that you just because you've got lives and jobs and children and
I
yeah.
mean, especially in a woman's
Hmm.
life becomes, um, it just really changes once you have a family. And no matter what you say you're going to do or how much room you're going to make for your friends, I mean, things happen.
Yeah,
And too.
yeah. When it comes to characters and writing, do you like to have really strong character sketches before you start writing, or do you prefer for your characters to evolve as you write? Or both?
Yeah, so Lucy was harder for me. She evolved. Josh, I kind of knew right away. I mean, Josh is a guy that I sort of worked with, many times. I mean, all different kinds of Joshes walk through the TV newsrooms that I've
Yeah.
been in. He was a little different in that um, I actually had to know his history in the same way that I had to know like the color of his eyes, like right away, because he was he is a person who is so deeply enmeshed in his past, and he doesn't even realize it. That, that history, he carries that history with him, that kind of old wound with him everywhere. So I really did need to know that right away. Lucy was a little bit slippery. She just, I just, I remember drafting and redrafting her, just trying to get at her kind of emotional truth. That sounds super weird, but
Mhm.
like trying to find her heart. I think the first thing I knew about Lucy was that she loves her friends more than anyone.
Yeah.
She loves Addie more than any other friend.
Yeah.
She'll do anything to protect her friends. And so once you kind of know that, and that she also has a thing in her life that she is ashamed of. So I had to figure out where that was too, so it was really kind of she was tricky for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And I imagine it was a challenge to find that balance between because she is our narrator, so you want people to keep reading and you can't make her confusing or unlikable enough that people are like, no, I don't care. But you have to also establish what's going on with her and why she thinks the way she thinks, etc. So was that balance hard to find for you?
It was because she's nothing like me. Like,
Yeah.
so she's the first character who is completely unlike me. She does have the one quality about her that I did not love, and that's like a determination to hold on to certain delusions. I
Yeah.
found it very frustrating as like a former journalist. And then also, when I was a kid growing up, my father lied all the time. And I found that to be, it's just a quirk, an ick of mine. So when you give a character an ick, you have to make them a particular ick. You had to make them really likable to you. And there is nothing I think better than a person who really loves their friends and who's really loyal and who really looks out for them to a point.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everything for all these people was always to a point.
Yeah.
It's just if you just would have stayed at this point and not step over that point, everything probably would have been okay.
Yeah. You just mentioned something that got me thinking in a way I hadn't thought of before. If Lucy and Josh ever had more of an opportunity to have more conversation, which they really didn't, they might have found more common ground because of their fathers. Like they both had very complicated relationships with fathers growing up, but they never get to that point.
No. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with they're opposite sides of the same coin. They're
Yeah.
essentially the same character, but flipped,
Yeah.
like yin yang. Addie was just so protective of both of them, though.
Yeah.
And that was her real flaw.
Hmm.
That was her, she never sat down and said, in the beginning, in the very opening chapter, Lucy says that they didn't know Josh, not really. They only found out about him because they heard about it. They only found out that Addie was dating him because they heard about it at a party.
Hmm.
When they finally sat her down and made her talk, she just didn't want to do it. And then when they broke up in the most public way imaginable, um, she wouldn't go into details except for that she was more frightened than she had ever been before. And those are all like sort of red flags.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like explain yourself, but um she was protecting Josh. And then in the same way, she was protecting Lucy from Josh. And that kind of lack of communication. I mean, I think that when you're really young, you think that that works, but it just doesn't work.
Yeah. The Sweeties are interesting because we get to know them as a group, but of course they are four individuals as well, and each character has her own personality, her own flaws, and those affect the group dynamic. Again, we were talking about the group dynamic before, but of course, each girl, each young woman, I should say, affects the group dynamic as well. And so Josh and, or excuse me, Addie and Lucy really are more prominent. We see and hear more from them than we do from the other two in the Sweeties. And so they have maybe a bigger effect on the group because Lucy, of course, we're getting the most point of view from. Addie is the one that changes that dynamic the most when she starts dating Josh, etc. But we are going to take our next break of this episode, and when we come back, Christina will be talking about including Josh's point of view and why she decided to include not only Lucy's point of view but Josh's as well. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Christina Kovac. Before the break, we were talking a little bit more about group dynamics and how those affect the entire story. I mean, they really are at the heart of this story, these relationships between the four sweeties and that group dynamic. Of course, there's also the mystery, but the heart of the story is really those dynamics and how they change throughout the book. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Christina.
Yeah.
You said Josh and Lucy are two sides of the same coin. So did you ever consider only writing it from Lucy's perspective, or did you always have the two perspectives in mind?
I thought about just Lucy, but I thought that he was so uninterested in knowing her, other
Mm,
than the way he wanted to know her, that I really needed to get him on the page. He's a lot like he's a male celebrity journalist, and from my experience, which is not everyone's, so this isn't like a truism, they tend to think they know everything.
mm,
They tend to think they can just say, okay, that person is that person is worthwhile, that person is not. This might be a very Washington, D.C. thing, but I could see Josh walking into a party and just walking right past one group of people straight for another. I don't find that to be an appealing quality, but it's also, I think, a necessary quality for someone like him to make quick judgments.
mm-hmm.
And he goes out to interview people, and you got to decide really quickly, is this person telling the truth or not? You have to go into a situation where you have to decide, is this dangerous or not? And if it is dangerous, what do I do, and how do I defend myself against this? So he's a guy who makes very quick um decisions about situations, people, what he believes about those situations and people, and pretty much you're not going to change his mind once he
Mm,
comes to that conclusion.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Location is familiar to you. Josh's career probably, familiar to you in a lot of ways. What research did you do for the novel?
I didn't, so every single, so in terms of location, I've been to every single place in that book.
Okay.
I love that part of town. I love DC. I think DC is um, the prettiest. I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's the prettiest city in the
Okay.
world. Just, I love it. And I really love the people down there. I had really the good fortune of being interviewed, being invited into people's homes to interview them. So I kind of carried that with me, all the stories that I've done before. That was just sort of in there. When Addie goes for a jog on the Sino Canal, I can't even tell you how many stories of women attacked while running I did.
Yeah.
So all those things were very familiar. What I was not familiar with is the psychology. So I did a little bit of like the nerd girl,
Mm,
reading all about the psychology like say reenactments. I thought that was really interesting, which is a psychological um, sort of thing where people tend to be um, attracted to people who have hurt them in the past, or they
right.
tend to see past situations in the present, and they actually are attracted to that because to they want to do over, essentially. They want to come out of it better. They want to, have a better outcome. It's kind of a redemption thing. And I found that to be so moving. And I really like that for Lucy. So I did a lot of research on delusions. I'm not delusional. I don't even like lies. So I sort of did like a lot of like nerd girl research on lies, which is so weird. Anyway, so that is basically it.
Yeah.
I was in the NIH portal for like, I don't know, a month.
Yeah.
Got really,
Um, we're obviously not going to talk about the ending. People have to find out for themselves, but did you have that ending in mind always, or no?
yes. I always thought that it was going to be a story about that ending. I
Okay.
just didn't understand the characters and how they came to that
Gonna
ending.
Okay.
And I didn't understand how some of the characters would react. And it was really interesting and fun to just sort of imagine I was any of those people and how I would react to the situation. Strangely enough, I think my personality, I tend to be more like Josh. So the girls were just so fun to me. I got to just,
Mm.
you know, step out in the world and, be 23 again and,
Yeah.
try to find my way through that sort of emotional morass. It was,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to kind of put yourself back in that time period, and also nice to be like, yeah, I'm okay not being there anymore. Wouldn't mind it that my knees don't hurt as much, but I don't need to be 23 anymore. I was saying I would like to have my 23-year-old knees back, but there are parts of being 23 that I would love to go back to. Maybe if I could take my current knowledge and I don't know, hopefully I've gained wisdom since I was 23. If I could take that back with me, my life experience. But I don't really have a desire to be 23 again necessarily. If you could go back to any age, what would it be? Would you stay here where you're at, or would you go back to a certain age? Was there a favorite year, a favorite age, a favorite time period in your life? You can contemplate that as we take our last break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about Lucy a little bit more, but specifically where she's from. So you're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Christina Kovac. Before the break, we were talking about Christina putting herself into the place of each of those characters of the four sweeties and imagining what it's like to be 23 and living at this time and those relationships. So she was talking about writing those characters, but let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Christina.
So the girls are all from different places and they come to university like
Right.
most, I mean, that just happens, right? So Lucy is from a place in Georgia that is off the coast, like, my favorite barrier island I was telling you about, Assateague. And so I got to like go online and do a lot of research about that. And that is really fascinating. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting to imagine yourself living in a place like that and how hard that
Mm-hmm.
must be. I mean, coastal areas, they really struggle
Yeah.
with employment opportunities, a lot of environmental degradation. The people who live in these areas, they tend to be smaller knit groups, and it was just so fun. That was really cool too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mm.
You said you're working on your third book. Anything you want to say about that?
Not too much because I'm not ready. The synopsis is slightly in flux, but it's
Hmm.
about it takes place down on Capitol Hill. And I'm staying in DC again for this third book. I used to live in Capitol Hill, and it's a great neighborhood. And I just imagine these two women who are enemies, but they're also mothers of children, and they um, they come at odds about their children, and it's really about motherhood. and it's really about what we'll do for our children and what we won't do. They're kind of feral mothers. So yeah, I went to explore feral motherhood, and there's a murder, and yeah, I think that's all I really want to say.
That's fine. It's in flux. You're working it out.
Yeah,
Um, do you have any specific advice that you would give for someone who has a story they're thinking maybe they want to write it?
I'll do it. I mean, do it. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, it doesn't matter if you necessarily publish, but you could publish. I think the biggest things that I know to be true about writing, which are not that many things, is, do it every day. I do it first thing in the morning. I get up and I write, and I try to write before the world wakes up and everything, kind of comes at you, and give yourself time, every day to work on that um, craft.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the day, read.
Mhm.
Always read. I just read. I try and read 1 or 2 books a week. Read outside your genre. Read writers who have great sentences. Read writers who have great plots. Read as much as you can and just try and be really open to it. I think that writing a novel is probably the most difficult thing I ever did. Um, and that's really the cool thing about it too. You'll never write a perfect novel. I mean, no one's ever,
Mhm.
I mean, Beloved is pretty perfect. But I mean, aside from that, there just really aren't that many perfect novels out there, and you never will. But it's the challenge that really makes your life worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you do read, do you have favorite authors and genres?
Oh boy. I mean, so I get through spells. I
Hmm.
mean, like the reason why I went with my agent, I had been talking to a bunch of different agents, but the reason why I went with Dan is because he was Megan Abbott's um agent, and I was reading all Megan Abbott at the time, and I just thought, well, if he likes Megan Abbott, maybe he'll like me. And he did. Right now I'm in a gothic kind of mood. I've been rereading all kinds of gothic thrillers. I'll read literary fiction, but I always go back to thrillers. There's something about the intensity, I think, that I like,
Hmm.
and when they're done really well, the kind of psychological the looking into psychological excess, the just the things that are really dangerous. It's exciting to me because I like to think about um, what's dangerous, and maybe I better not do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's nice. It's nice to be able to read about it or write about it, but not actually.
do it.
Okay, yeah, do it.
Right. It's like I'll
It's
watch my
easy to
kids get on
say.
these.
It's easy to Monday morning quarterback the thrillers of. I wouldn't have done that.
Right. Right. I love visceral scares. I mean, I watch my kids get on roller coasters and I'm like, oh my God. But I don't go on them and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so if people want to learn more about you and the books, you've got a website. Share the website and any social media you're active on.
I'm at ChristinaKovac.com. I'm mostly on Instagram. I do have a Facebook account, and I do a little bit of threads now. I'm not on X. And then I have a newsletter on Substack, so which I'm behind on.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Um, Christina, is there anything that we have not touched on that you wanted to make sure you highlighted it during this time?
No, I think just that I think, you know what? I actually don't have anything more. I mean, I think that was really, no,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Really
All
good.
right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And you said this is normally your writing time, so thank you for talking to me rather than writing right now. I really appreciate it.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you again to Christina for joining me to talk about Watch Us Fall. If you are a fan of psychological suspense, um, crime fiction to a certain extent, but definitely that psychological suspense, then you should check this out. If you're intrigued by the relationship dynamic, which is really, really central to this story, then that's a very good reason to check this out. But also, this I can't give away the ending or even allude to any parts of the ending, but you might be surprised. It might not go where you think it is going to go, or maybe it will, but not in the way that you think it might. there's the group dynamics, but there's a lot of secrets and a lot of lies of omission and lies, deliberate lies in this story. So what does that all mean, and where does that take you? If you like books like that, then definitely check this out. And of course, you can find out what else Christina has written, and maybe you've already read something by Christina, so this is another one that you want to read, but definitely check out. There's a lot of good points of entry into this story, depending on what kinds of books you like to read. So definitely check out her book. I enjoyed it. I had one theory that I didn't think was correct, but I was like, that would be crazy. Sometimes the crazy theories can be right. Not always, but I like to create my own crazy theories. And then I had another theory which was more correct. So it's fun for me to try to figure it out. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I figure out parts of it. But you read it and you decide, or you see if you figure it out, and where in the book you kind of figure things out and things start falling into place for you. That's the fun of these kinds of books. So thank you again to Christina for joining me, and thank you to you, as always, for joining me for this interview. I hope you'll join me for the next episode. We're switching gears to high fantasy. So I will be speaking with author H. Layton Dixon about her book, Ship of Spells. This is the first of a duology, and as I said, it is high fantasy. It's high fantasy on the ocean. So that was a little bit different for me. You've kind of got elves and dwarves and all kinds of fantastic creatures, but pirates and mercenaries, and on the high seas you've got two warring kingdoms. You've got a completely different planet because it has multiple moons and two suns. So very high fantasy, lots of world building. So please join me for the next episode as I talk about Ship of Spells with H. Layton Dixon. In the meantime, as always, if you're a fan of this podcast, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Helps the podcast get out to more readers. Engage that algorithm for me if you don't mind. I would really appreciate it. Something else that engages the algorithm is to leave a positive review. Incredibly helpful. So if you could take just a minute to leave a positive review, I would love that. You would make my whole week, month, maybe even year. Could go anyway. Do the same thing for the authors whose books you love too. The world runs on algorithms now, and it's incredibly helpful to leave reviews. If you're on social media, you can find the podcast on many different social media sites. They're all linked in the description of this episode, but you can find the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads. But again, those are all linked in the description. I hope you're having a great week. Tomorrow is Friday. Maybe you have something planned for the weekend. I hope you do. I hope it's not too hot where you are, or if it is, you are hydrating well and staying cool in whatever way works best for you. Hubby and I, it wasn't even that hot here today, but we went to the pool twice. It was amazingly wonderful. I just like to float around and pretend I'm working on my core muscles. I mean, I am, because I'm treading water and doing those things, but it's not like I do a really hard workout. I just float and enjoy, and it's wonderful. Sidetrack. Whatever you have planned, I hope it's wonderful. Whatever you have planned, I also hope that it gives you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.